You've joined us for another installation of getting to know the biggest and brightest artists in the world with me, Jules Hallam. And I was having a think earlier, how could I introduce someone who's had such a rich and varied career as Gilles Peterson? So I just thought I'd say, Gilles, it's such a pleasure to meet you today. Thank you so much for joining us. Havana Cultura is sounding great.
Yeah, we're really pleased. I mean, it's difficult to kind of rehearse a band who live in Cuba and prepare for a European tour. We just released the album this week, which is the second part of the sort of journey I'm undertaking in Cuba the last couple of years, and the first album was a success, and so they wanted to do another one. So The Search Continues is the subtitle for it, and I had a bit more time to prepare it, and I had a bit more, obviously, experience with that country and the musicians that live there, and discovered some new people. So I went out there this January to start preparing the album, which we recorded in April. I went over there with Mala, the DJ, as well. Oh, really?
And so, is he into the whole Cuban music scene as
well? Yeah, he discovered it in a way, coming out there with me. I thought that it would make a lot of sense to get someone like him from the real sound system culture, very much of the now, but also connected to Cuba by coming from the island next door, which is Jamaica. So I thought that it would be good to make that connection. So he came over there with me in January, and I introduced him to all the rhythms of Cuba and the people that I'd met, and gave him a sort of tourist guide, tourist guide over there. And we recorded some beats, and then we came back and spent the winter preparing, then went back to Cuba in April and got a studio with a couple of different rooms in it, and then most of the musicians would come through my studio A, and then with Sinbad, who's working on the project right now downstairs as well. He's the sort of musical director of the live project.
Is he the guy with the laptop?
And then next door in Studio B, Mala was there with his little laboratory, and everyone went through him. So at the moment, the phase 1 of the album's just come out in the UK, and around probably March time will be the Mala reinterpretation of Havana Cultura.
I'm trying to picture a Gilles Peterson tour of Havana. Is it a case of smoking big old Cuban cigars and drinking lots of rum, or is it a lot to do with exploring the music around there as well?
Yeah, I mean, every time I go to Cuba, to be honest with you, it's usually quite a restricted time. So you don't go over there and you've just got time to kind of swan around? We're just working so hard because we have limited time, and every time I've been there, I've made a record. And so I'm pretty quick at kind of, because of my other work as a DJ and on the radio and running the label and stuff, I can't just go. I wish I could go out there for a month and just do 2 weeks of chilling and relaxing, smoking cigars, drinking rum. But we just kind of held, especially the last time, we held it back till the last couple of days to let
your hair down. Where would you check out if you're in Central and you've had a heavy recording session and you got a bit of time to kill?
Yeah, it's funny. Havana, there's two Havanas really. There's a Havana that's pretty set up for the tourists and for people who are sort of going over there to chill and to listen to the music, and that's very much more directed towards the sort of more stereotypical Cuban experience. But really, when I go over there, I have, fortunately, over the times that I've been, I've got to know a lot of the musicians and the singers and the rappers and the producers and stuff. So they just take me to different places every time. There's always something new sprouting about. So my tip for anybody going to Cuba is to try and find somebody who is, truly into the scene and the culture and the music over there, and just sort of give them what you'd normally pay, a regular tourist guide, and just give them what you give them, and they'll give you a much better trip, I'm sure.
Because I get the feeling with a lot of the music out there, there's almost a very kind of spiritual element to it, and they're really, really into their music, and it's very close to the heart for them.
Yeah, of course it is, and there isn't so much television, and there isn't really any internet, so
really.
Not really, no. It's very hard to get online, and
surprised.
Even the hotels is really hard to get it. So in a way, it's kind of going back a few years in terms of, the relationships you have with people and with nature and fundamental things like music. So it becomes a really important part of your life. So
and it must be quite similar as well to, I guess, what we had 20, 30 years ago in London, actually going out and finding great artists that need to be heard, as opposed to now where a lot of it's done through the internet.
Yeah. It's maybe not as active as you might think over there. I mean, of course, when it comes to sort of rumba and the traditional forms of music, it's everywhere, and Santeria and all the religious stuff connected to music, that's the source of it in a way. You know, batter drummers and the rhythms of Cuba, it's phenomenal how much influence it's had around the world. But when it comes to sort of new music and electronic music, that's a lot more hard to come by, because there is less of it around. There's less equipment around.
Right.
So basically people are having to do with not a lot, and so the music scene, when it comes to electronic stuff, you don't get a lot. You've really got to go. Over the last couple of years, I've noticed that there's been more of a sort of DJ scene building slowly. A few DJs are going over there, people like Ricardo Villalobos and some more techno kind of guys have been in there. Diplo goes down there sometimes to check out some of the bands like Kylie 13 who come from Puerto Rico, check out the sort of growth of the reggaeton scene and where that's going, and the kind of sort of very small but exciting hip-hop scene that they have over there. So there is a thing, but it's most Cubans probably don't even know much about the sort of more advanced electronic music.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the guys who are here with me at the studio and who we're touring with, for example, Alexei, who's one of the rappers in Obsession, he's a crazy sort of Dilla freak. So so the best,
he was the guy who was, I'm sure he was rapping. I couldn't understand anything that he said when I walked into the studio, but he was actually rapping, right?
He's one of the very, very top rappers in Cuba, but he kind of connects the rumba and the hip hop, and so that's what makes it really interesting. I mean, the other person who's amazing is Danae, who's here, who's the smaller of the two girls, and she's an amazing singer, as you know, as you can hear on the album, but she's also an amazing freestyler when it comes to hip hop. So she can spit with the best of them, but she can also sing with the biggest of all. You know, so she's a real talent. In fact, it's quite interesting because the first album we released, the French market really discovered Danae, and we did a solo album with her, which has done really well in France. So I think in France, where they've probably got a deeper world music scene, where people are a little bit more open-minded about music and appreciate all sorts of music, it's probably a bit more than they do here in the UK. They've really taken to Danae. There's also more places in France for artists like that to perform at, whereas in England you've got a good scene, but it's very restricted to just people who like that kind of music. So you know, apart from WOMAD and a few you know, the odd radio show and the odd club, there isn't such a sort of a movement for this sort of new world music.
I'm going to let you in on a little secret, Giles. When I walked into the studio earlier and saw Danae, I was like, I didn't know Miss Dynamite was doing Cuban music these days. I was totally mistaken. She's amazing.
She's amazing. She's incredible. I mean, it's funny because last time we were here, she was with Robert Glasper, who's the American pianist, and they got on quite well. And he's playing tonight as part of the London Jazz Festival, so I'm going to take them all down. I'm just in my head at the moment. I've been told I can get 5 people on the guest list, but there's like 10 here.
There's literally so many people.
So I don't know how I'm going to work it out, but we'll see.
Because a big influence behind your first trip out to Cuba was Roberto Fonseca, who you've developed quite a relationship with since. I mean, would you say he was quite instrumental in sourcing a lot of the music, particularly for the first compilation? Well,
not for the compilation, but he was important in terms of the production that we did over there, the recordings, because he kind of is coming from a jazz background, and we could kind of meet in the middle of what I wanted and where he was coming from, and we both had the similar sort of wanting to get to a point in the album that we were both going to be happy with. So he was really great, and he was a really good entrance for me. I couldn't have fallen under a better sort of, you know, person to guide me through it. But for this second album, I wanted to do a bit more post-production. I wanted to do a little bit more mixing with different groups, not just Roberto's group. So we also worked with Roberto Carcassés, who's the son of Bobby Carcassés, who's another sort of legend of more experimental Cuban music from the 70s and early 80s. And so we got his group here today, which has given the whole thing a different sort of vibe, a little bit less jazz, a little bit more pumping.